In order for me to do that, I'm going to walk through every single activity I will do to create a login for a user to log in and utilize an application using PHP. We are not going to add the database. We would add the database starting next week. So from next week, we'll be communicating the particular database. But for this week, we are going to see how we can write the PHP code alone that would execute, allow a particular user to perform a specific task. And the task we want to perform is logging someone. So without more to say, I would open up my app. I would open up my app. As always, we are supposed to go to the drive C, go to XAMPP, and XAMPP will go to htdocs. And in htdocs, we'll create a folder over there. And in here is where we'll create our application. I'm going to create a folder called sign up. And then I'll open the folder I've called sign up inside VS Code. So I have my VS Code opened up over here. And here is where I'm about to write all my code. So all my code would be here, dwell here, will live here, will work over here. Now, when I click on this, I'll click display. You don't have to do this one. This one is for me alone. And I've stored an extension which will help me demonstrate some stuff. Before we start developing, before we start building, before we start putting things together, the first thing in which we need to do is we need to establish what we are going to develop. So I'm going to develop a screen, and in my screen, I'm going to have a button, a tab here. I'm going to have another tab here, and I'm going to have another one here. But this one here is going to be the button that someone will click to log in. So on top of that one, we will have login written by here. On the side here, we are going to have some text where we would say the person should enter their username. And then we'll also tell a particular person to enter their password. So this is the interface that we want. We want this interface for a user to come and log in into our app. Once the user logs in into our app, very importantly, 1 second. Once a user logs in into our app, we want the user to be able to then go on. We want the user to be able to then go on to open a page. So when the user is able to log in, that user will go and open a particular page. Sorry, I've copied this one. Can't I click? Okay. Let me move it. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't select that down. Okay, no problem. Let me just delete it and create another one. That's fine. So once you are able to log in, we'll take you to a place that will tell you to that you are welcome. And then we'll give you something for you to log out. Yes. So this is the structure that we want to do. So we want to do this. Then when a user logs in, we take him to this page over here that he will then come, then view what is there and log out. That is what we do. Remember, we are not using any database. It means that we would have to create a username and a password that we would use to check internally. That is what we would need to do. So far, are there any confusion on what we have to do? Anyone confused as to what we have to do? Wonderful. If there's no one confused as to what we have to do, let's begin doing what we have to do. So the first thing I will have to do in my VS Code is create my index.php page. I'm also going to create my dashboard.php page. And I'm also going to create a logout.php page. So I need 3 pages. I need index, dashboard, and logout. Because the first page someone will see when they log into our app is going to be the login in page. That will be our index page. Then, of course, the dashboard will be the page you will see when you are able to log in. Then when you click the logout button, you take it to the logout button and do some things there. So these are the pages in which we require. These are the pages in which we would use to build our application. You can see again that I'm not just coding. There was a lot of thought going into every single sequence of action that I would do. Of course, before I code anything, I must make sure my Apache is on and my MySQL is on. As you can see, both of these two things are on in my application. Hence, I have no problem anything. I can run my application and I'll be fine. So I'll close this. In here, I'll start typing my code in the index, since this is the first place the person is. In the index, I'll type the basic structure of the HTML page. Remember, if I type HTML semicolon 5 and then I press tab, it will do this for me. In here, I am required to type the structure in which I told you. The structure I told you will have a head page. So here are a H1, so a H2, since H1 is too big. And then in here, I'll type the heading of my code, whatever I want to be the heading. The page is for login. So over here, I'll just tell the user that this page is for login. Under here, I'll create a form tag. Because remember, I want to create a form for the person to log in. In the form tag, I'll tell the computer the method at which I want to send data for the form is a post. Remember, the information here is sensitive, so I can't use get. Use a post to transfer the information in my form. The next thing, I'll write the action, and I want the action to be left empty, which means that when the code is run, the information will be sent to the page in which I am on. Now, I'll go ahead and write my code. So I'll write a div, but let me put everything here in a div so that my code looks a bit more professional. I'll use some CSS to design my code. So I'll give this a class name of container. And then in here, I'll say div. And then in here, I'll say it has a class name of form-group. Great. In here, I'll put 2 things. I'll first put a label for my index number. This is going to be the username of the person. So you type his index number over here. And then I will put over here, let me do a small break here. Great. Then in here, I'll put my input. The type of input is obviously going to be text. And here, the name of my input is going to be index underscore number. And then it is going to be a field which is required. That means that the HTML will force the person to type it. So I've finished my first thing. Let's go to our code and see what we have there. So when I go to my browser, I'm in my browser. Over here, I'll type localhost /sign up. Remember, I called it sign up in the htdocs. You can see that I have this piece of code over here. I have my login, the H1. I have the label, and I have my input, which is showing here. So I'm on track. Everything in which I'm doing is on track. I would copy out the code over here. Since most of the things I want to do are the same, I'll paste it over here. And let's make some changes where in this location here, I'll have password. And then in this location over here, I'll also have password. And then over here, I'll have a nice input. The type of input is going to be submit, and it is going to have a value which is equal to the person logging in. So again, if I go to the screen and I refresh, you can see I have a place for password and I have the place for this. Remember, password, the type is not text, it's supposed to be password. So that when the person comes and types in here, it will be hidden. So that right now it is showing. When I refresh and I do it again, it is hidden and the person can't see the password it's typed. So over here, I've done a simple login page. Of course, it doesn't look all that nice. So let me style it a bit, just so that it looks a bit professional. I'll use in-text styling, in document styling. So I'll just go and write my style tag. And then in here, I'll first start by targeting the class naming which I gave. Remember, I gave a class name called login container. So I'll just say .container. And then in here, I'll say the width of my container should be 300 pixels. I'll also tell the computer that it should have a margin to the top of 50 pixels, but all other sides of the page should be auto so that it could be in the middle. I'll say it should have a padding of 20 pixels. And I'll also say that the border of it should be 1 pixel thick and it should be solid. And it should also be gray. So I'll say this CC, which is gray. Now, I have put all of this code in here. When I come to my page and I refresh, you can see that I have a square over here, but the square is not around this. So let's see why the square is not around this. You can see that I made an error here. I did the div here and I closed it here. I'll cancel it here and come and close it at the bottom over here. So the div is wrapped around everything. Everything here should be inside the div. Once I do that, you can see that when I refresh my page, everything is in the middle and it is having a nice background at the back like this. It's looking a bit professional, but it's not all that professional. It's not there yet. So I need to make it look more professional. In doing so, I'm going to say that all the form groupings, so over here I have form groupings. So all the form groupings, which is a class, so I'll bring a dot in front, should have a margin to the bottom of 15 pixels. Now, once I've done this and I come back to my page, let me zoom out a bit so that we can see it is all its glory. When I refresh, there's some space over here between these two. And here I have a small design, but it makes it look a bit better than what it used to. Now, the idea is that when I come, I will type my index number over here. I'll type my password over here. When I click, it should log me in. It should take me to another page. It should open another page. Everything to this point is just HTML and CSS. Now let's come to why we are doing this course, the advanced part of this course, the JavaScript, the PHP. I'll put my PHP code at the top of the document. That is before the doc type HTML. I'll put my PHP code right there. Remember, to type PHP code, you require the PHP open tag and the PHP close tag. The open tag has the less than question mark PHP, and then the close tag is the question mark greater than sign. So this is my PHP tag. The next thing in which I'll do is I'll write a very important piece of code, which is session underscore start. Now, this introduces something very important into my code. This introduces the fact that in my code, I am going to use the session variable. Now, in last week's lesson, we learned about the get. If you were with us, we learned about get. We learned about get and post. Today, we are adding session to it. A session variable, like the name says, it works within a particular session. That means that whilst the browser is live, that variable is active. The moment you close the browser, that variable will not exist anymore. So here, we are creating a temporal variable that we can use throughout the browser at any location. But for you to use it in a particular page, you must tell the computer that on this page, I am going to be using a session variable. So here, I'm just telling the computer that I am going to be using a session variable on this page. That's number one. Number two, I need to create a place that will hold the username and password of the user. So here, I'm going to do $, valid underscore user. So what I've just done, as we have spoken about from last week, is that I have created a variable. In PHP, if you want to create a variable, you just put a $sign in front of something. So I've created a variable called valid users. And here, I'm going to create the variables and put them in a square bracket. In coding, whatever the programming language, be it PHP, be it Java, be it C++, the moment you see square variables, you know that you are creating an array or a list. In this case, we are creating an array. And the array is supposed to hold information for us. The information we want to hold is, first of all, the person's index number. So, for example, the index number could be 001. And then we are going to put implies over here and say the password is 123456. That means that wherever you see the key 001, that means that that person has a password of 123456. If I want to create another user, then it means I'll do 002. And then over here, I'll say the password is, let's say, 65432. Note that over here, it's a name I am choosing. For example, here I could have said that the username is 101, and here the username is 202. It doesn't have to be 111. I am the one creating this information. So I'm saying that in wherever you see this location here, what is there is going to be this. Wherever you see this location, what is there is going to be this. And I've kept them all in an array so that this is array 1, this becomes array 2 or array item 2. So in this array, I have saved 2 users so that I can use them to log in. So now let's attempt to see how we can log the person. First of all, I'll have to check if the username and password is correct. So for me to do that, over here, I have to look at my code very logically. If I want to check if your username and password is correct, you first of all have to log in. So you first of all would type the index number over here, you type the password over here, then you click the login button. So I'll tell the computer that if on my server, someone has typed someone has made a request. And that request the person has made is a post. Then come in and do all the things we have here. So upon you clicking the button over here, when you click it, that means that you have submitted the form, because remember we said that the type of form is submit. That means that when you click it, you are submitting this entire form. And this entire form, its method is a post. So the moment you click, you have invoked the request method post. So we will do the actions which we're going to put in here. Once the person invokes that action, once a person invokes that action, in the coding which we have over here, we can see that once you click login, I need to collect what you typed here, collect what you type here, and go and check it with my system or my database. So when I come back in here, I'm going to say, create a variable called index underscore number. And index underscore number, go and put into it $ underscore post index underscore number. So this index underscore number we have over here, where is it coming from? It is coming from the name value we put over here. So we are telling the computer, once the information is sent as a post, some information is packaged called index number. Go for it. So we are telling the computer, when you go to the post, go for the information that is packaged as this. And if you're a very clever person and you are very observant, you realize that the post has square brackets, which means that the post variables are all arrays. So we are telling the computer, go to the post and go for the item that is saved inside the location called index number. We are also going to tell the computer, go to the post. So let me call this input password. So that in here, I can say $ underscore post into square brackets password. So that if I go back to my code and I go back to the bottom over here, I can see that the name property of the input is password. That means that the information will be saved in the location called password. So I'm saying whatever the person has typed here, go for it and put it here. Whatever the person has typed in password, go for it and put it here. So at this point in time in my code, I know what the person has typed as their index number and password. But over here, I'm going to add a piece of code called trim. And I'm going to put all of this thing in a bracket around the word trim. So I'm going to type trim again, and I'm going to put something here around it. What is the job of the trim? Because they're supposed to go for the information. So what is trim doing for us? Whenever you have a form, so I'm here and I'm typing. So normally when people type, some people will press space and then they'll start typing, which means that over here, there is something here. It's a space. You can see I've highlighted it. Some people are there too, when they finish typing, then they'll leave a space at the back. So the trim's job is to say any space in front or at the back of the thing, remove it, so that we will not get any errors in our code or in checking if your username and password is correct. So over here, that is the job of the trim, to remove white space before and after information. So in here, I'm going to say if into bracket array underscore key underscore exists. So we are going to ask the question, if the index number the person typed can be found inside the valid users. So here we are saying that the person is typing his index number. the index number he has typed. So this is the index number he typed. Remember, we're going to take what he has typed and put it here. So whatever is there is the index number he has typed. If the index number he has typed is found in valid users, so in this case, the computer will come and check here and check here if the index number is the same here and here. Now, if this is true, we also want to check also if when I take the valid users and I go and check inside them using the person's index number, it would be equal to whatever the person has typed as his what? Password. So let me bring this one over here so that we can see them all in their glory. So we can see them all in their glory. So over here, we are checking two things. Remember, if I'm using an AND, it means that here has to be true and here also has to be true before my entire code can be true. So first one, we are saying that the person typed an index number. Can we find the index number over here? So this array key exists. We'll go and check this key and check this key and check if your index number is there. If it is there, it will come and say this here is true. If it is not there, to come and say it is false. Full stop. Now, let's come back here. Over here, I'm saying go and take valid users. So it will go and take valid users. Now, go and take the valid user who has the index number you have typed. For example, if you type 11101, it means that over here, since you type 101, over here will look like 101. So we will say in 101, what is there? In 101, it is 123. So it means that this will also go away and it will turn into 123. So the password section, what did you type there? On the screen, we type something over here as our password. So whatever we type, let's say we type 1234, 1234. So here to check, whatever that is over here, is it the same as what you have typed? If they are not the same, it will say false. So if here is true and here is true, then you will be able to say the person is the correct user, so we are logging in. If let's say we find your index number, but your password is wrong, we are logging you out. Because remember, with AND, both sides have to be the same before we can do something. So that is how this code looks like. Now, if everything here is okay, if everything here is secure, we know that the key can be found and then your index number is correct, then we have just created or found a user. So we can say, first of all, that $_session into square brackets logged in. Remember, session variables are used during the duration of the program until the browser is collapsed or until you close it yourself. So I have just created a session variable called logged in, and I'm going to make it equal to true. And I'm going to create a second session variable. And I'm going to call my second session variable index number. And I'm going to say the index number should be equal to whatever the person typed as their index number. Let me use an underscore here. So with that in mind, now the most important piece of the whole code, I have to take you to the dashboard. So I'm going to say header into brackets, location, into double quote, location. Remember, this piece of code here is standard, so you need it. The only portion of this code that will change is where I've typed dashboard. So if you want to take him to home, or you want to take it to about us, or you want to take it to something else, then you type that address there. But in my case, I want you to take you to dashboard. Then when I'm done, I'll say that the program should exit at this point. It should stop. It shouldn't continue running because you have already diverted it to another place. So it shouldn't continue running or doing anything. So just putting this back together like how it should be so that it's more visibly appealing. We have the if statement over here, and then inside here, if the if statement is correct, we'll come and do the code we have over here. Else, we'll come and tell you that you have an error, and then your error is you have an invalid username. So in this case, we use index number or password. Wonderful. So our code now has been set and has been created. We have our code now done. Now, this error passwording which we have over here, we'll have it to display it to the user. Best place to display it is under the title. So we'll just come and put the PHP sign here again. Remember, this is the open tag and this is the close tag. And then in here, we'll just say if an error has been found. So if is set error, then we should echo out the error that the person has found. So there. So if we have found an error, we should echo out the error. But this will just display the error there and it would not look very nice. So instead of me just saying display the error, I would rather do this. I'll put a double quote here, and here I'll put in a p tag, and I'll put in a class and call the class error. And then I'll close it here. And within here, I'll put the error here so that it will display. So that now it will display as a p tag rather than just displaying on my screen and looking unprofessional or unnice. Now it will display on my screen looking a bit better and nicer. Yes, it will display on my screen looking a bit better or nicer. But it will display black, and I don't want it to display black. So I'll just copy this and tell the computer that wherever it sees the class name called error, it should make sure that the color of that thing is red. So now let's see if our program will do what we want to do. If I refresh, if I come here and I type this as my username and this as my password and I click here, it's supposed to bring the error I have over here. When I click, nothing is being done. Let's refresh the screen again. When I click in here and I type in here and I click here, nothing is being done, which means there's an error in my code somewhere. I have to figure it out. So let's figure it out together. Over here, we said here it is called error. When we scroll to the top here, we called it error. So the error portion of it is okay. Over here, we said if a request is made, we should do that. So that aspect of my code is correct. We check the validity of it and it is correct. We check the inputs here and they are correct. So let's see why it is wrong. First of all, let me do everything correct. So in here, let me say the username is 111 and the password is 123456. So when I click here, it's not doing anything. Let's see. So nothing is happening when I click. You're supposed to load the page. It's not even loading the page. So let's see why it is not doing that. So because it is not loading the page, the first place I'll go and check is the input in which I've done here. Because understandably, the input is supposed to trigger the page being loaded. I can see that with my input, I have my type being submit, so that aspect is correct. I have my value being login, so that aspect is correct. But I forgot to close the tag for the input. So here, I'll just bring this tag here so that the input tag is closed. Again, you saw how I got an error and how I thought about solving the error. We all make mistakes. And there's a reason why when I'm teaching, normally I leave the mistakes there because most of the time I don't make mistakes. So it makes the students think that um, making a mistake is a bad thing. We all make mistakes. So when I make a mistake, you see how I thought about solving my mistake. I went to the source at the beginning, make sure it is correct. If this place was correct, I'll come and check if here is correct. If here is correct, then I'll come and check the code if it's receiving information. So if I go back here and I refresh my screen again, now if I type a username 101 and I type the password 123456 and I click, you can see that it is taking me to the dashboard. It is taking me to a page called dashboard. Okay, now if I enter 1111 and I enter a password and I click, it is telling me that I have an invalid username and password. It is blocking me. The only way it will allow me to enter if my username and password are correct. They combine with each other and they are correct. So we are able to log in. But you saw that once I type the correct username and I type the correct password, and I click in, it says not found. The moment the computer tells you that something is not found, it means that it does not exist. It is not there. So over here, I typed dashboard. That's fine. Let me come in here to the side menu. You can see that here, instead of me typing dashboard, I type dashboard. So I'll just rename this and then add the B to the dashboard so that the spelling of it is correct. Now that I know that the spelling of it is correct, before I go there, I'll just put in the basic structure of the HTML page. And then in here, I'll just write in some code there so that when we get there, we know that we have logged in and we are there. So in here, I'm going to say welcome. So H2. I'm going to say welcome. But who is welcome? Who has come here and is welcome? So at the top here, I have to add some PHP code over there. I'm going to say PHP. And then in here, I'm going to say session start. Remember, every single page that you would use a session, you must start the session over there. So here, I'm saying session start. So that in here, I can come and put my PHP code in here. Remember, PHP is embedded, so I can put it in any location I want. All I have to do is type the PHP tag and say echo $_session into square brackets into double quotes index underscore number. So we will tell the person that he is welcome. And then also over here, we'll tell the person with the P tag that this is your dashboard. Okay, and then we'll add this piece of code over here, a tag, href, logout, .php, and then we'll click here that say logout, so that the person knows that when he clicks here, he's logging himself out. Wonderful. So when I come back to my code, and I come back here, and I refresh my page, and I press 101, and I press 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I click on login, you can see that it says welcome 101. Can we see that? This is your dashboard. If I come back here and type 202, and remember that one, the password was 654321, it takes me back here and says welcome 254621. So remember, if it's an application, you can put the person's name there. So it says welcome, let's say Alfred, or welcome Paulina, or welcome Samuel. Like how when you're logging into your Gmail, when you log in, it says, oh, welcome, Mark, this kind of action. That is how it is done. You see, that is the action. That is how it is done. But there is a problem with my code. You can see that if I go to log in and I come back here, it is still telling me I am welcome. Normally, with an application, when you leave the page and you come back, you shouldn't be allowed to come back. Or better still, when you click on login, you shouldn't be allowed to see the information about it. So what we are going to do is we are going to protect this application. We are going to say the following code. If is set $_session log in. So here, if $ and assertion is logged in, we'll put a not over here. So if it is not logged in, it's set to say if it is logged in. The not will make it a negative statement. So if it is not logged in, and at the same time, $_session logged in is not equal to true. I remember yesterday we did something like this where we said if logged in, where if true, if you remember when we're doing the Java. That's the same thing we are hearing here. So first of all, if here there is something, if there is nothing there, go in here. If there is something here, but what is there is not true, go in here. And when you go in here, we are going to say header location in double quotes. And what location are we sending you? We are sending you to the index page. And when we are done, we exit. Now, amazingly, when someone comes and clicks on this logout button, it takes him over here. In logout, you are not coming to type a lot of code there. We'll just type the PHP tag there. And then in here, we'll just tell the computer the following information. That session start. That's number one. Number two, session destroy. That means that if there's any session that we have created for our entire code, the person hasn't closed his browser yet, but destroy it. And then in here, we'll just say header location. We are sending you to the location, which is index.php. So technically, what we are doing here is we are destroying any session we have created, then we will take you to the index. So this is how normally a session code is. There is no need for me to bring the close PHP tag because on this page, there is only PHP there. So I don't need to bring the close tag. With that, let's see how our application works. If I go and click logout, I cannot go back. You see, I'm clicking back, but I can't go back to the dashboard anymore. Because when I go to the dashboard, it will tell me that I don't have any session there, so I can't go and see anything there. If I want to see something there, then I must be able to log in. So if I type in the information to log in and I come here, then I can see my information. But the moment I can go back, I can come do anything. But when I click log out, I can't go back. Every time I go back, it will take me to the login page because I do not have the required credentials to view the dashboard anymore. I have killed it. I have destroyed it through the logout. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a simple application, a simple demonstration of how to create a login application. I have created it, I have done it, and I have shown you how it is done. This is how all application logins are created. This is what happens when you click logout. This is how everything is done. Of course, this is done at a small level, but we will grow it from next week where we will now go and pick information from a database and log the person. How do we take information from the database, not just from the form, and log the person? It is very important to note that the code you see on the screen today, you go over it before our next meeting, because from our next meeting going onwards, we will add a different component to our coding, which involves us dealing with databases. So everything will now become very technical. And you can see how I utilize the HTML and the CSS to do just a quick design, but it looks good with the login. It makes the login refreshing and good. Thank everybody for coming this week. The video is recorded, so it will be made available to you. Are there any questions? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Hello.
I have noticed a few changes when we're doing HTML and then the PHP.
Mhm.
In HTML, we were able to link some of the, for instance, we're not holding the CSS on the same page.
Oh, okay. If you are coming to ask me, can you put the CSS on a different page? You can do that.
You can do that.
Of
Okay,
course.
so it means that you can link it to the main PHP index
Oh yes,
page,
the same way you linked it with the
HTML.
HTML, that's the same way you link it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The .php is there because you are just adding PHP code. If there was no PHP code on this page, we just make it .html. So
Oh,
everything works just like the HTML. It's just that it's just .php.
okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, welcome. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah. I realized I want to know when you key in an error password or user an index, an index number or password, and then it comes out with a error. You have an error being written there. Automatically, does it give you chances like maybe three tries or 5 tries, or you have to state it in the PHP?
Are you asking me? I don't think I understand your question. But let me see if let me see. Let's say here I type in a wrong username and a wrong password, and I click here.
Exactly.
Tells me that username and password is wrong, so I can try again.
It's wrong. Okay. How many times can you try?
So Jesus Christ counts.
Sorry.
So Jesus Christ counts.
Okay.
So that is why I said I don't understand your question. If your question you are trying to ask me is that if the person tries 3 times, should you stop him or something like that? If that is your question,
Yeah, because
you are the coder, so you have to now go and write that code. So you now have to go and write the code that if this activity goes on for 3 times, then say you have to wait for an hour or something like that. All of those things you have to code them. But if you don't code them, it is just the person can just keep on doing it to Jesus Christ.
Oh, that was what I was trying to find out. Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello,
okay,
sir.
Yes.
Hello.
Okay, so to add to Desmond's question, would let's say, would that come in the condition to say that if after a second or third trial, the system should log the user out? Would that come within that is the if condition where the array is?
That will come within here.
Oh, okay.
So over here, if you create over here, if you were doing that, if you were doing that, what I will ask the guy, okay. If you were doing that, it means that in here, I will create a session variable because a session variable never expires. So I'll create a session variable that will count the number of times the activity is done. And if the activity is 3 times, then I'll stop. But that will come in here. Yeah, the whatever you type, whatever code you type will have to come in the if statement here and then in here.
Okay.
So that before you even go and collect this information, if you shouldn't do that, you stop it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. August.
Yeah, hello, sir.
Yes.
I was observing the authentication mechanism being used.
Okay.
So looking at this, assuming our data that we have, where the valid users in, whether you store the array with the IDs and then, so assuming we had that data in a database, sitting in a database, behind a database, and we have the same authentication logic, right? Using the AND operator. Okay,
I'm listening.
using the AND operator, and then a user, right, has a valid, he knows a valid index number, right, which is true. he knows a valid index number, which is true, but doesn't have a password, a valid password, right? And then he is able to add a logical statement called OR, right? Introduce a logical statement OR in the index field or form, right? And then add another true statement. Let's say a single quote after the correct index number, then adds an OR 1 equals 1, which is a true statement. Would it automatically redirect us to the dashboard, log us in straight, or there's a way to actually, because the user is then playing around with the logic behind the authentication? I don't know if my question makes sense.
Your question makes sense. What you are trying to do by your question is you are trying to do something called SQL injection.
Okay.
SQL injection is a way whereby I can inject positive SQL code that would make or trick the computer's request to be seen as correct and then give you a positive feedback. So your job as the programmer is to do something we call sanitization. So you can see that here I did a minimum amount of sanitization where I've highlighted, whereby I said trim the front end and the back end. So whatever, let's say if I type, for example, if I type the word, let's say John, like this, if there is any space in front of John or at the back of John, remove it. But that is not the only sanitization that you have to do. You have to say if there is any escape character, for example, the person has double quote or something, then remove it. If the person has a slash, remove it. Things like that. So that anything that goes into your database would be clean. So the activities you do has nothing to do with the algorithm over here. It has to do with the data that is coming in. You must ensure that the data is clean. The data is pure. There is nothing wrong with the data. So you have sanitized the data. So if you are doing cyber security, or you are doing any security on systems, it is very important that you do SQL injection. There is an entire book on SQL injection where you have to study how to prevent your system from having some of the attacks you are talking about.
Thank you, sir.
But again, that has to do with database. So this week we are not doing anything database. Are there any more questions?
Okay, so one more question. Sometimes when you are using certain applications, right, once you are dormant, like you stop using the application for a few minutes, it automatically times out your session.
Yes.
I don't know how that is implemented. Like it automatically just, like expires your session for some weird reason. I don't know.
And so you set the timer. What, Hello? Hello?
Yeah, hello?
You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You see the way in which this page, we said that if the user is logged in, they direct him to the index page. Other than that, continue. The same way over here, you'd say, okay, as the user, like every time the user goes to another page, the time he has gone there, you take it. Are you following me?
Yes,
so
sir.
When I hit this page here, I'll take the time in which I arrived at this page. That's simple to do. You can just say, of course, you would have to put it in a session variable or something that you can put on every page. So over here, you just say session into square brackets time. And then in here, I'll just say whatever time, whatever time that is on the person's computer at that time. So here, are you taking minutes or are you taking seconds or are you taking, what are you taking? So in this case, logically, you take minutes. So here I'll have I. So it means that over here, I'm taking minutes. So whatever minutes you have on your computer at this exact time, take it here. Take it and store it here. Okay? So here I'll just say if the minutes you have at this very, very time. So whatever page you are coming from, the minutes you have is equal to the minutes in which you have currently over here times, let's see. Oh, okay, over here, I'm sorry. I didn't think of what I'm doing very well. So here, I would say, I'll take the minutes you have and say whatever minutes in which the person has brought to the page. So whatever minutes you brought to the page. Minus whatever minutes in which is there. But obviously this will be bigger. So I'll put this one here. It will be like this. Then time should not be greater than or equal to 30. So if time is greater than or equal to 30, that means that you have done more than 30 minutes. So the application should be logged out. So you will check with the time function. Take the time you are there currently. Like if I had multiple pages, each time I click, I'll go to a different time. So if I am dormant and I click, the time in which I arrived at that page and the time I went to another page, what is the distance between the two? If the distance between the two is more than 30 or 15 minutes, then lock the person out. Things like that. If you want to do it in real time, then you have to use a socket. But of course, that is us getting into higher level things in which we are not supposed to get into. Are we okay? All right. Thank you all for appearing here today. As always, I'll send you the video, and I've already put the code we did for the class today in your classroom. I'll also send you some reading materials with respect to session, post, and get, so that you can read it in your free time. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.